Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine the smell of breakfast, specifically that rich, sugary, comforting scent of maple syrup. Got it. Okay, now open your eyes, because the thing we are talking about today isn't a pancake topping, it isn't a waffle, it's a legume that has been hiding in your spice rack, masquerading as a curry ingredient, while quietly holding the potential to rewire your metabolism. We are talking about fenugreek.
It is a fascinating bait and switch, isn't it? You smell maple syrup, but you are actually looking at Trichinella phonograecum, one of the oldest medicinal plants in recorded history. And you were right, it is usually just that curry smell to most people. But when you look at the stack of research we have today, calling it a spice feels like a massive understatement.
It really does. I was going through the notes, and the range of what this plant allegedly does is staggering. We are looking at a metabolic regulator, a hormonal modulator, and a potential neuroprotector. It's like a Swiss Army knife that grows out of the ground.
That is a perfect analogy. And we have the science to back it up today. We aren't just relying on folklore here. We are pulling from comprehensive reviews out of the Medical University of Gdansk in Poland, some great agricultural data from King Saud University, and a particularly interesting double-blind clinical trial on aging men from Australia.
And we are going to get into all of that, the hormones, the brain health, the diabetes connections. But I have to go back to the smell. I mentioned maple syrup in the intro, and I saw in the notes that this isn't just a coincidence. It's actually a chemical crossover.
It is. The compound responsible is called sotalol. It is an incredibly potent aromatic lactone. And to give you an idea of how powerful this stuff is, it is the primary aroma compound in fenugreek, but it is also found in lovage and, well, maple syrup.
So when I smell fake maple syrup, I might actually be smelling fenugreek.
Very likely, or at least the same primary chemical. And here is the sensory detail that usually shocks people. Sotalol is so chemically stable and potent that if you ingest high quantities of fenugreek seeds, the compound can bypass your metabolic filters. It gets excreted through your pores.
Wait. So you are saying if I go heavy on the fenugreek supplements, I literally start sweating syrup?
You do. There are documented cases in medical literature where patients, sometimes even infants whose mothers were supplementing, presented with a maple syrup odor in their sweat and urine. It's harmless, but it is certainly a conversation starter.
You smell delicious takes on a whole new meaning.
Okay.
But beyond the fact that it makes you smell like a walking breakfast buffet, our mission today is to unpack the paradox of this plant. Because as I was reading through the source material, I kept hitting these contradictions. It seems like for every amazing thing it does, there is a but or a warning attached to it.
That is exactly right. That is the maple-scented paradox. Fenugreek is a metabolic superhero, but it can be dangerous if you are on certain meds. It seems to boost testosterone in humans, but as we will see, it seems to do the opposite in rats. It protects the stomach, but it can stimulate the uterus.
So it's not a simple take this and feel good supplement. It's a complex tool.
It is a tool that requires a manual, and that is what we are doing today. We are writing the manual.
All right, let's start with the basics then. The plant itself, Trichinella phonograecum. If I am walking through a field in the Mediterranean or Central Asia, what am I looking for?
Well, you are looking for a pretty modest diploid annual legume. It doesn't look like much at first glance. It has these yellowish white flowers that are shaped like little triangles. That is actually where the genus name Trichinella comes from, Latin for little triangle.
A little triangle with a big impact.
A huge impact. And not just for humans. From an agricultural perspective, this plant is a beast. It is what scientists call a multi-purpose crop. It's incredibly tough. It tolerates drought. It tolerates high salinity in the soil. And it thrives on marginal lands where other, more delicate crops would just wither and die.
It sounds like the kind of crop we need in a changing climate.
Absolutely. Yep. And it gives back. It's a legume, which means it fixes nitrogen. The data from the Saudi Arabian research was pretty clear. It pumps about 283 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year back into the soil. It basically revitalizes the earth it grows in.
So it's a soil healer. But humans figured out a long time ago that the pods, those long things with the hard seeds inside, could heal us too. We have records going back to 4000 BC.
We do. It is one of the oldest relationships we have with the medicinal plant. The ancient Egyptians were heavy users. It is listed in the Ebers Papyrus, which dates to about 1550 BC. They used it for embalming.
Embalming? Was that for the smell?
Likely the aroma, yes, but also for its antimicrobial properties. They used it as incense too. But then you look at the Romans, they used it to help with labor pain and delivery.
So a completely different application.
Completely. And in traditional Chinese medicine, it was the go-to for edema or swelling and leg weakness. They saw it as a warming herb that moved fluids.
And in Ayurveda, I imagine it's a big deal there.
In India, where it is known as methi, it is a staple. It's in the food, it's in the medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
They have used it for centuries for lactation support in nursing mothers and, crucially, for managing diabetes.
That diabetes link is so interesting because it seems like ancient wisdom was way ahead of the curve on that one. When we look at the nutritional profile of these seeds, it's honestly shocking. I usually think of spices as flavor dust, negligible calories, negligible macros. But fenugreek is built like a protein bar.
It really is. It destroys the category of spice. These seeds are composed of anywhere from 25 to 43% protein. That is incredibly high for a plant source. And it's quality protein, rich in essential amino acids like lysine and tryptophan. But the real headline, if you were looking at metabolic health, is the fiber.
The numbers in the report said 50 to 65% fiber. That can't be right.
Correct, 50 to 65%. And it's mostly non-starch polysaccharides. So imagine a tiny seed that is over half fiber and a quarter protein. It is basically a nutritional brick.
A brick that smells like maple syrup. But let's get into the mechanics of this. How does a fiber-heavy seed actually manage diabetes? Because the sources were very specific about it being a metabolic regulator.
It works on two levels, the physical and the chemical. The physical mechanism is fascinating because it is so simple yet so effective. The specific type of fiber in fenugreek is called galactomannan gum.
Galactomannan. Sounds like a comic book villain, but I'm guessing it's a good guy.
In this context, definitely a hero. When you eat fenugreek seeds, this gum hits the water in your digestive system and it hydrates. It swells up and forms a thick, viscous gel.
Like a sponge.
Exactly. Think of it as a fiber sponge inside your gut. This gel physically traps the food you've eaten. It slows down gastric emptying. It creates a barrier that digestive enzymes have to fight through to get to the carbohydrates.
So if the enzymes can't get to the carbs fast, they can't turn them into sugar fast.
Precisely. It slows down the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. Instead of a massive sugar spike right after a meal, you get a slow, manageable trickle. It physically flattens the curve.
That makes so much sense. But you mentioned a chemical mechanism, too. Is that where the insulin secretagogue term comes in?
Yes, and this is where fenugreek shows off its sophistication. The seeds contain a unique non-protein amino acid called 4-hydroxyisoleucine.
4-hydroxyisoleucine. I'm going to let you handle the pronunciation of that one. What does it do?
It talks directly to the beta cells in your pancreas. It tells them to secrete insulin. But here is the critical difference between this plant compound and some older pharmaceutical drugs. It is glucose dependent.
Break that down for us. Why does glucose dependent matter so much?
Well, imagine a drug that just screams, release insulin at your pancreas, regardless of what your blood sugar is actually doing. If your sugar is already low, that drug could crash you into hypoglycemia, which is dangerous.
Right. It's a blunt instrument.
A very blunt instrument. But 4-hydroxyisoleucine only stimulates insulin release when glucose concentrations are high.
So it's smart. It only steps on the gas when it sees a hill.
Exactly. It improves peripheral glucose utilization and insulin sensitivity, but it has this built-in safety valve. It's a remarkable evolutionary adaptation.
It's amazing to think a plant figured that out. And it's not just sugar, right? The sponge and the chemistry seem to do a number on cholesterol, too.
They do. The research describes a significant hypolipidemic effect. That means it lowers lipid levels in the blood. We see reductions in total cholesterol, LDL, the bad cholesterol, VLDL, and triglycerides. And often we see a bump in the good HDL cholesterol.
Is this the fiber sponge at work again, just trapping the fat?
Partly, yes. The fiber binds to cholesterol in the gut and prevents it from being absorbed. But the cooler mechanism involves the liver. Fenugreek seeds contain saponins. When these break down in your gut into sapogenins, they trigger a specific chain reaction. They increase the conversion of cholesterol into bile acids.
Okay, I feel like we need to connect the dots there. Why do we want to turn cholesterol into bile acids?
Because bile acids are how your body gets rid of cholesterol. Usually your body is very thrifty. It releases bile to digest food, but then it reabsorbs those bile acids to use them again. It recycles. But the fiber in fenugreek grabs those bile acids and escorts them out of the body.
So the recycling plant shuts down.
Right. And now the liver's panicking. It says, I need more bile. But it has no recycled bile to use, so it has to make fresh bile. And the only raw material it can use is cholesterol. So the liver starts pulling LDL cholesterol out of the bloodstream furiously to keep up with demand.
It's basically forcing the liver to do a deep clean of the blood.
It is a great way to visualize it. And it doesn't stop there. It also inhibits lipase activity, which slows down fat absorption from your meal. And it even increases the number of LDL receptors on the liver cells to grab that cholesterol more efficiently. It's like opening more checkout lanes at the supermarket to clear the queue.
Okay, so we have a plant that acts as a traffic controller for sugar and a vacuum cleaner for cholesterol. If the deep dive ended here, I'd be convinced. But the research takes a hard left turn into something, well, something sexier.
Literally.
We need to talk about hormones, specifically men's health. We have this clinical trial from Australia on aging male symptoms. Now, before we get to the results, what exactly are we defining as the aging male?
Well, biology is relentless. After age 40, a man's testosterone levels tend to decline by about 1 to 2% per year. It's a slow, steady erosion. This leads to what clinicians call AMS aging male symptoms: fatigue, muscle weakness, mood changes, and a very notable decline in libido and sexual function.
So the study wanted to see if fenugreek could act as a brake on that decline.
Or even an accelerator for recovery. This was a solid piece of science, published in the Aging Male Journal, double-blind, placebo-controlled. They took 120 healthy men aged between 43 and 70, gave them 600 milligrams of a specialized fenugreek seed extract called Testosterone every day for 12 weeks.
And what happened? Because I'm skeptical of herbal aphrodisiacs, usually the results are vague, felt more vigorous.
The results here were statistically significant and surprisingly specific. They measured a decrease in the somatic and sexual symptoms of aging. But let's look at the numbers because they tell the story. At the start of the study, these men reported having morning erections about once a week on average. By the end of the 12 weeks, the fenugreek group was reporting 2 to 3 per week.
That is a very measurable physiological change.
It is. They also tracked sexual frequency. It went from about once or twice a month to nearly once a week. But what really anchors this study is the blood work. It wasn't just that they felt more desire. The study showed a significant increase in both total testosterone and free testosterone levels compared to the placebo group.
So it actually shifted their hormonal profile. It wasn't just a placebo effect.
Correct. It acted as genuine androgenic support. It moved the needle on the actual hormones.
Okay, so that sounds fantastic for the guys listening. But, and here comes the paradox, you highlighted a section in the notes about rats, and it seems to contradict everything you just said.
This is the record scratch moment of the episode. While the human data looks great, the animal data, specifically studies from Poland on male rats, shows the complete opposite.
How opposite are we talking?
We are talking about an anti-fertility effect. In these studies, the steroidal fraction of fenugreek extract reduced sperm count in the rats. It reduced sperm motility. It even decreased testicular weight and lowered testosterone levels.
Wait, so in humans, it's a booster. In rats, it shrinks their testicles. That is a terrifying discrepancy.
It is certainly enough to make you pause, and it highlights a massive issue in translating animal research to humans.
How do we explain that? Is a rat just that different from a human?
Species difference is part of it. Rodent metabolism handles saponins and other compounds differently than we do, but the expert consensus leans toward 2 other factors: dosage and composition. In the animal studies, they were often using massive doses per kilogram of body weight doses a human would never take to stress for toxicity.
Okay, so they were blasting them with it, and the composition.
This is key. Fenugreek extract isn't a single thing. It's a cocktail of chemicals. The human study used Testosterone, which is a patented extract standardized for specific compounds, these furanolix saponins, which are believed to support testosterone. The rat studies might have used a raw steroidal fraction that was concentrated with different, perhaps anti-androgenic compounds.
So it's a quality control issue. You can't just chew on a handful of seeds and expect the clinical trial results.
Exactly. The lesson here is that the extract matters. In humans, at 600 milligrams of a standardized extract, it appears pro-sexual. In rats, at high non-standardized doses, it's anti-fertility. Nuance is everything.
Speaking of nuance, let's pivot to women's health, because traditionally fenugreek wasn't a men's supplement. It was used for women. What is the hormonal mechanism there?
We have to introduce a new character, digestion. This is a steroid saponin found in the seeds.
Yeah.
Structurally, if you look at the molecule, it is remarkably similar to the precursors of estrogen and progesterone. It acts as a phytoestrogen.
Phytoestrogen. So phyto from plant, it's a plant-based estrogen.
Yeah. Weekly, yes. This is why it has potential for menopause. When a woman goes through menopause, her natural estrogen drops, leading to hot flashes and mood swings. Because digestion looks like estrogen, it can bind to those receptors and provide a mild signal. The research shows it can reduce hot flashes and vasomotor symptoms. It's not as powerful as hormone replacement therapy or HRT, but it helps.
Now, I have to ask the question that I know is on people's minds. If you Google fenugreek, the internet is flooded with claims about bust enhancement. Is there any science to this, or is it just wishful thinking?
It is mostly wishful thinking mixed with a little bit of mouse data.
The mice again?
Always the mice.
Yeah.
In studies on ovary-ectomized mice with no ovaries, high doses of digestion did stimulate mammary gland growth. And we know for a fact that fenugreek is a galactagogue, meaning it stimulates lactation in nursing mothers.
So people see promotes milk and grew tissue in a mouse and assume breast enlargement for humans.
Exactly. They conflate lactation with tissue growth. But I have to be clear. There is no solid clinical evidence in humans that taking fenugreek will permanently increase breast size.
Myth busted. But there is a darker side to this estrogen mimicry. If it acts like estrogen, does that raise red flags for cancer, specifically breast cancer?
This is a critical safety warning. Estrogen receptor-positive cancers, like certain types of breast cancer, feed on estrogen. They use it to grow. The source material references studies on MCF7 cells, which are a specific line of breast cancer cells used in research.
And did the fenugreek make them grow?
In some in vitro studies, yes. The extract stimulated the proliferation of these cancer cells because they were activating those estrogen receptors.
That sounds like a hard avoid if you have that risk factor.
It definitely warrants extreme caution.
Yeah.
But here is the paradox again. Other studies show that digestion, that same compound, actually inhibits tumor growth and induces apoptosis in other cancer cells.
Apoptosis.
Programs cell death. It tells the cancer cell to self-destruct.
So one part of the plant might feed the cancer while another part orders it to commit suicide.
Or the effect depends entirely on the dose and the specific chemical environment of the cell line being tested. The Polish review was very explicit about this contradiction. It said the effects are inconsistent. So if you have a history of hormone-sensitive cancer, you should not be rolling the dice on fenugreek without an oncologist's approval. It's biologically active, and that means it carries risk.
It's wild how we've gone from maple syrup to industrial soil fixing to complex oncology. But we aren't done. The outline mentions brains, pain, and protection. This seems like the frontier of the research.
It is. Let's talk about the brain. There is an alkaloid in the seeds called triglycerides. The research suggests it works as an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor.
That is a mouthful. What does that mean in plain English?
Okay, so your brain uses a chemical called acetylcholine to send messages related to memory and learning. You have an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase that cleans up that chemical after the message is sent.
Like a janitor.
A very efficient janitor. But in conditions like Alzheimer's, you don't want the janitor clearing it away so fast. You want the message to stick around longer. Drugs like Donepezil work by stopping the janitor inhibiting the enzyme. Triglyceride appears to do the same thing.
So it's working on the same pathway as some Alzheimer's drugs.
It appears so. But it goes further. Some studies suggest it actually promotes the regeneration of axons and neurites.
It regrows the wiring.
In lab models, yes. It helps rebuild the connections between neurons. And there's more. The research also suggests it can protect neurons from amyloid beta plaques, which are a key feature of Alzheimer's. And there was even one human study that showed fenugreek extract reduced motor impairment in Parkinson's patients when used as an adjuvant, a helper, alongside their standard medication, L-Dopa.
That is incredible potential for neuroprotection. What about the protection part for the stomach? Are we going back to the sponge for that?
We are. Remember that mucilage, that gel?
The fiber sponge.
It acts as a gastroprotector. It coats the lining of the stomach and intestines. In rat studies, they exposed the stomach to ethanol, pure alcohol, and strong acid. The rats that had been pre-treated with fenugreek showed significantly less damage.
Like an internal shield.
Exactly. They compared it to omeprazole, which is a standard drug for ulcers and heartburn, and found fenugreek could be just as effective in reducing gastric juice secretion.
That explains why it's been a folk remedy for upset stomachs for thousands of years.
And for pain. The anti-inflammatory effects were comparable to diclofenac in some animal models. Diclofenac is a strong NSAID painkiller. They tested it using the rat paw edema model. They induce swelling and they measure how much the substance reduces it.
So when you take this, you are potentially getting blood sugar control, cholesterol management, hormonal support, brain protection, stomach soothing, and pain relief. It sounds too good to be true. It sounds like a miracle cure. But I know you. I know your role here is to bring us back to reality. Natural does not mean safe. We've touched on the cancer risk, but what are the other warnings? If I run out and buy a bottle of this stuff today, what could go wrong?
There are 4 major interactions that every listener needs to memorize. If you fall into any of these categories, fenugreek is not a casual spice for you.
Lay them on us. Warning number 1.
Blood thinners, specifically warfarin, but also other anticoagulants.
Why? Does fenugreek thin the blood too?
It contains coumarins. Coumarin is actually the chemical parent of warfarin. If you are taking a prescription to thin your blood and you add a plant that contains the same active mechanism, you're in trouble. The Polish review also mentioned an interaction with paracetamol, or acetaminophen, that can increase bleeding tendency.
You are doubling down on the effect.
You are multiplying the effect. You significantly increase your risk of bleeding. You can turn a minor bump into a major internal hemorrhage. It is a dangerous combination.
Okay, that is serious. Warning number 2.
Diabetes medications.
But wait, we spent half the episode saying how good it is for diabetes.
That is exactly the problem. It is so good at lowering blood sugar that if you combine it with insulin or sulfonylureas, which are also forcing your sugar down, you can crash.
Hypoglycemia.
Exactly. You can drive your glucose levels dangerously low, which can lead to confusion, seizures, or even a coma. Patients can use it, but they often need to lower their prescription dosage under a doctor's supervision. You cannot just add it on top of a full drug regimen without monitoring.
Got it. It works too well to be ignored. What's the third one?
Thyroid medication. This one is a bit more preliminary, but there was a study in rats that combined fenugreek with garlic. And that combination lowered T3 and T4 levels, which are your active thyroid hormones. So if you're on medication like levothyroxine for hypothyroidism, this could potentially interfere with it.
So you could end up under-medicated even if you're taking your pills.
Potentially, yes. It needs more research, but it's a flag.
And the final warning, number 4.
Pregnancy. This is a hard no.
Because of the history of inducing labor?
Precisely. Remember the Romans. Remember Ayurveda. It stimulates uterine contractions. While it is excellent for lactation after the baby is born, taking it during pregnancy is risky. Animal studies have shown it can cause abnormal fetal development and even resorption of the fetus.
That is a stark warning. So if you are pregnant, stick to the maple syrup, skip the fenugreek.
Ideally, skip the syrup too, but yes, definitely skip the fenugreek.
Okay, let's zoom out. We have covered a massive amount of ground. We have a legume that fixes nitrogen in the soil, smells like breakfast, acts like a fiber sponge to stop diabetes, boosts testosterone in men, with a caveat about rats mimics estrogen in women, regrows brain wiring, and acts like a shield for your stomach.
It is the ultimate example of why botanical medicine is so complex. We like to put things in boxes. This is food. This is a drug. This is safe. This is dangerous. Fenugreek refuses to stay in any of those boxes. It is a nutrient-dense food that acts pharmacologically like a strong drug.
It really challenges the idea that the spice rack is just for flavor.
It demands respect. That is the takeaway. If you are dealing with metabolic syndrome or you are an aging male feeling that decline, this plant holds massive potential. It is accessible, it is cheap, but you have to view it through a scientific lens. You can't just sprinkle it blindly.
You have to know the interactions, you have to know the chemistry, you have to know the source of your extract.
And I'll leave you with one final thought to let marinate. We talked about digestion, that compound that looks like estrogen. Do you know where the pharmaceutical industry gets the raw materials to make modern hormones?
I assume they just synthesize them in a lab from scratch.
In many cases, they don't. They use digestion as the precursor. They extract it from plants like fenugreek and wild yam to synthesize progesterone and corticosteroids on an industrial scale.
Wait, so the birth control pills or the steroid creams people use, they started as the seed?
Often, yes. The fundamental carbon skeleton comes from this plant compound. So when you look at that little yellowish-brown triangular seed, you aren't just looking at a curry ingredient, you are looking at the raw building blocks of the entire modern endocrinology industry.
That is mind-blowing. It makes you wonder what else is hiding in the kitchen cabinet that we just haven't decoded yet.
Exactly. What other pharmacies are sitting right next to the salt and pepper?
Well, next time I smell maple syrup at a curry house, I'm going to be thinking about industrial hormone synthesis.
And Sodalon. Don't forget the Sodalon.
Never. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Check your spice racks, check your interactions, and stay curious. We will catch you on the next one.